Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
We love to just take one fascinating topic and just really get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And today, it is all about robotaxis
Yep.
and the future of transportation. And our jumping off point is this really interesting article from SpySat
Oh,
News
yeah.
called The Autonomous Revolution with Robotaxi.
Mm.
It just came out last month on October 24th, 2024.
Okay.
And we're going to be digging into all the hopes and the hype and
Yeah.
maybe some headaches too surrounding this whole idea of Tesla's self-driving robotaxi ambitions. And
Right.
this is a big deal. Tesla's going head-to-head with Waymo
Yeah.
in the robotaxi race.
Yeah.
The Cybertruck is actually selling like hotcakes, which
Uh-huh.
is pretty wild.
Wow.
And then there's the question of job displacement. What happens to all the drivers
Right.
if we have all these robotaxis on the road?
Yeah. It's really fascinating because it kind of touches on so many different things. It's not just about Tesla and their technology. It's really kind of a collision of all these different trends, like this push towards autonomous vehicles in general. The whole automotive industry is evolving. And then, yeah, like you said, the potential impact on society as a whole.
It's big. So let's break it down a bit. The article really focuses on Tesla's ambitions in the robotaxi arena. And, they're already doing some testing in California and Texas.
Right.
But, Elon Musk's timeline for all of this is,
Yeah.
well, he's known for being a little bit
Ambitious.
optimistic, shall we say.
Yeah. And then there are the regulatory hurdles, too. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got Waymo. They're already operating fully driverless robotaxis in San Francisco. They've
Yeah.
got the green light from regulators. So
Right.
Tesla's kind of playing catch up in that sense.
Yeah, and of course, we can't forget about the safety aspect of all of this. Tesla's full self-driving software, or FSD as they call it, has had a few, let's call them learning experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And, for those who might not be super familiar with how this all works, these systems rely on a lot of different technologies.
Yeah.
Like LiDAR, radar, computer vision, all working together to create this picture of the car's surroundings. It's called sensor fusion. And that's really the key to making sure they can navigate safely.
It's complex.
Yeah, it is. And I think it raises a really important question, like, how do we balance this excitement for innovation
Right.
with the need for safety and accountability? Like, it's not just about being on the cutting edge, it's about people's lives.
Absolutely. So, on the one hand, we have all this with robotaxis and potential safety concerns and regulatory hurdles and all that. But then on the other hand, there's this nugget from the article that just blew my mind.
Oh, yeah.
The Cybertruck is the third best-selling EV in America,
I know. It's crazy.
meeting out the Ford Mustang Mach-E. I mean, who would have predicted that?
It really says a lot about Tesla's brand power and just the demand for EVs in general. It's exploding.
Yeah.
And what's even more wild is that they achieved this with the Cybertruck only being available at its highest trim level initially.
Right.
So that's a pretty bold strategy.
It is. And it seems like it's paying off to put those numbers into perspective. Ford sold 7,000 F-150 Lightnings and 13,000 Mustang Mach-S in the third quarter of this year. GM sold 32,000 EVs total.
Wow.
And Rivian, a newcomer, sold about 3,800 electric pickups in the same time frame, so the Cybertruck is just crushing it.
Yeah, and all of this feeds into Tesla's overall financials. For Q3, they had $25.2 billion in sales, $2.2 billion in profit,
Wow.
and almost $739 million from regulatory credit sales.
That's huge. And just to clarify for our listeners, regulatory credits are basically
Yeah.
a way for automakers to offset their production of gas-guzzling vehicles by investing in electric vehicles.
Exactly, like a way to kind of balance things out.
And Tesla has really benefited from this system.
Yeah, they have for sure.
But here's where things get a little bit interesting. While Tesla is killing it with the Cybertruck, their supercharger station growth has actually slowed down.
Oh, really?
It's only about 20% year over year, and this is after they rehired part of their supercharger team following those big layoffs earlier this year. So I'm curious, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It could point to a shift in strategy. Maybe they're moving away from this rapid expansion of the supercharger network
Yeah.
and focusing more on refining their existing technology and infrastructure.
Wow.
Like maybe they're realizing that it's not just about having more chargers. It's about making sure the ones they have are really reliable and easy to use.
It's like, what's the point of having this amazing electric car if you can't find a place to charge it?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so we've got Tesla pushing forward with robotaxis. The Cybertruck is exceeding expectations. But then there's this interesting development with the financials and the supercharger strategy. It's like all these pieces are connected.
It's like this whole puzzle, and
Yeah.
it's playing out right in front of us. I mean, we're seeing this whole industry in flux right now.
Yeah.
You've got these rapid advancements in autonomous technology, this booming market for electric vehicles, and you've got established players like Ford. They have to adapt quickly. It's like
Right.
a pivotal moment in automotive history.
It really is. And we can't forget about the human side of all of this. The article touches on some pretty big questions about the impact of all of this on our jobs, our cities, our safety.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to think about the consequences, both good and bad. This isn't just about cool gadgets and futuristic cars.
Right.
This is about the future of transportation and what that means for society as a whole.
So we've set the stage. We've talked about Tesla's robotaxi dreams, the Cybertruck success, the everyday driver.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin to unravel this complex web?
Well, I think the article highlights some really key areas where these autonomous vehicles could have a major impact, and I think the most obvious one is transportation itself. Imagine a world where getting from point A to point B is faster, safer, more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, no more traffic jam.
Exactly.
No more road rage.
Right.
Maybe even cheaper transportation costs in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good, right?
It does.
But we also have to be realistic and acknowledge the potential downsides. And one of the biggest ones is the impact on jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Think about all the people whose livelihoods depend on driving: taxi drivers, truckers, delivery drivers.
Right.
These jobs could be at risk.
I mean, it's millions of jobs, potentially.
Yeah, it's a significant number, and it's not a simple solution.
Yeah.
Businesses might benefit from increased efficiency and lower labor costs,
Sure.
but we can't just ignore the people who might be left behind. We need to be thinking about retraining programs, safety nets, creating new opportunities for those whose jobs are disrupted.
It's a really complex issue.
It is, but it's a conversation we need to be having right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just jobs we need to think about. Autonomous vehicles could completely change the way our cities are designed and how our infrastructure works.
Absolutely.
Imagine cities designed primarily for self-driving cars. Less congestion, more green space, maybe even a shift towards more pedestrian-friendly environments.
It's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, it's like a city designed for people, not just cars.
Right, but then we also have to think about accessibility and equity. Like, will these new urban spaces be accessible to everyone?
Right.
How do we make sure everyone has equal access to transportation in a world dominated by autonomous vehicles? These are the kinds of questions we need to be asking ourselves now.
Yeah, and we can't forget about safety. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. We need really strong regulations and rigorous testing to make sure these vehicles are safe for everyone. Drivers, passengers, pedestrians, cyclists, everybody.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the vehicles themselves. We need to invest in the infrastructure too, smart traffic management systems.
Right.
Seamless communication between vehicles and the infrastructure around them, fail-safe mechanisms in case of emergencies.
It's like this whole ecosystem that needs to be developed really carefully.
Exactly.
So we've talked about potential job losses, urban planning changes,
Yeah.
safety concerns. What else does the article highlight?
Well, they also talk about potential shifts in fuel demand. As we move towards autonomous and electric vehicles, the demand for traditional gas-powered vehicles is likely to drop.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that could have huge ripple effects throughout the entire automotive supply chain.
Right. I mean, companies like Ford with their F-150 Lightning,
Exactly.
they're going to have to adapt as the market changes.
Yeah, there will be winners and losers in this transition, but I think it's important to remember that we're still in the early stages of all of this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's also a lot of opportunity.
So we've got these potential impacts on jobs, urban planning, safety, fuel demand. What about the financial side of things? The article mentions Tesla's healthy Cybertruck profit margins. How does that play into all of this?
Well, it suggests that Tesla might be in a really good position to capitalize on this evolving market. If they can maintain those margins as they ramp up production, they could have a real competitive advantage.
Especially if they're also focusing on refining their existing technology and infrastructure like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It seems like they're playing the long game here.
Yeah. And the article doesn't just present these dry facts and figures. It also includes these really thought-provoking comments from readers, and they're asking some big questions about the future of transportation and how these autonomous vehicles are going to fit into our lives.
I love those reader comments. They bring up those deeper philosophical questions that we need to be wrestling with.
Yeah, and one commenter, Ezra Knapp, asked a question that really stuck with me. How do you envision the role of human drivers evolving in a world where autonomous vehicles become increasingly prevalent?
Eh,
I mean, it's a question that's probably on a lot of people's minds.
For sure, it's a big one, and I don't think there's an easy answer, but it's something we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and another commenter, Grayson, brought up the possibility of new business models emerging, like hyperlocal ride-sharing services or peer-to-peer car-sharing platforms. It's kind of exciting to think about all the innovation that could come out of this.
Absolutely. Disruption often leads to creativity, and I think we're going to see a lot of that in the transportation sector.
Yeah. Isabel made a great point about the role of government in all of this. She argues that government should be investing in infrastructure to support the widespread adoption of autonomous transportation. It shouldn't just be left to private companies like Tesla.
I agree, it's a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
We need public-private partnerships to make this work.
And finally, Violet reminds us of something really important in the midst of all this technological excitement, she writes. Even in times of rapid technological change, human health and well-being must remain our top priority.
That's such a crucial point. We can't forget about the human element in all of this.
Yeah. Technology should serve us, not the other way around.
It's that.
So we've really explored the key points from the article, delved into the potential impacts of autonomous vehicles, and grappled with some of the big questions raised by readers. That was a lot to cover.
Quite a lot.
But there's still so much more to unpack. So we're going to pick up right where we left off in part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into robotaxis and the whole evolving world of transportation. In part 1, we kind of set the stage, talked about Tesla's ambitions, the surprisingly strong sales of the Cybertruck, and all those potential impacts, on jobs and how our cities are designed, safety, fuel demand. It's a lot.
There's a lot to unpack.
But now I want to kind of shift gears a bit and dive into some of the more, nuanced and maybe even philosophical questions that came up.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
Because one of the things that really struck me from that SpySat news article was this comment from a reader named Eric.
Okay.
And he kind of expressed this unease about this whole autonomous revolution. This idea that maybe we're sacrificing some of our human connection for just pure convenience and speed.
Right.
And he also brought up concerns about job displacement and just making sure we're prioritizing human well-being in the midst of all this technology.
Yeah, I think Eric's comment really gets at the heart of, what do we value as a society?
Right.
Are we willing to kind of trade off certain aspects of our human experience for those perceived benefits of technology?
Yeah, it's like this tension between progress and tradition, We want new things and shiny new technologies, but we also want to hold on to what we like about the old ways of doing things. And there's a certain romance to driving a car,
Right.
That feeling of freedom and skill and independence.
Absolutely. But we also have to be honest about the downsides of the current system.
Right.
We've got traffic accidents that claim so many lives every year. Congestion is a nightmare in so many cities.
It is.
And then there's the environmental impact of gas-powered vehicles. These are real problems. And, autonomous vehicles could be part of the solution.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But how do we make sure that in solving these problems, we're not creating a whole new set of problems?
Right. That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's where thoughtful design comes in and ethical considerations. We need to anticipate those unintended consequences. Think about, what could go wrong and really try to create systems that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
So it's like balancing progress with tradition and then approaching this whole thing with a really strong ethical framework.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
What about those anxieties around job displacement? We talked about millions of people who could be affected by this shift to autonomous vehicles. How do we address that?
Yeah, it's a really daunting challenge for sure. But I think the first step is acknowledging that it's a real issue. We can't just pretend it's not going to happen.
Right.
We have to be proactive.
So what can we do? Retraining programs, safety nets.
Yeah, exactly. We need to invest in those things.
Okay.
Robust retraining programs that give people the skills they need for the jobs of the future.
Right, because those jobs might not even exist yet.
Exactly. And then we need to think about social safety net programs, providing income support healthcare for those who are displaced during this transition. And we need to incentivize businesses to create new jobs in sectors that are going to grow, things like renewable energy, healthcare, education.
Those are all great ideas, but that's a lot.
It is. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
but it's an investment we have to make. We
Yeah.
can't ignore the human cost of progress.
And Eric also brought up this idea of, making sure we're prioritizing human well-being in the midst of all of this.
Yeah.
So how do we ensure that these technologies are actually making our lives better, not just more efficient or more convenient?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it starts with defining what we mean by well-being.
Right.
Is it just about maximizing convenience and efficiency, or is it about something more?
Yeah.
Do we want to create a world where people are just glued to their screens even when they're commuting?
Right.
Or do we want to create spaces where people can actually disconnect, maybe have some time for reflection or connection, or even just relax?
It's like those sci-fi movies where you see people in these driverless pods,
Right.
but they're all just kind of isolated from each other.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's not necessarily the future we have to create. We have choices. We can design autonomous vehicles that actually encourage social interaction.
Yeah.
Maybe they give people access to nature and fresh air. We can use technology to create a more human-centered transportation system.
That's a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah, it's about shifting our mindset from technology first to human first.
I like that.
And involving people in the design process from the very beginning,
Huh.
making sure these technologies are really tailored to human needs and aspirations.
So we need to balance progress with tradition. We need to design these systems, ethically address job displacement, prioritize human well-being. What else are we missing in this whole equation?
Well, one thing we haven't really talked about is regulation.
Oh, right.
Governments have a really important role to play here
Yeah.
in making sure these technologies are developed and used safely and responsibly. We need clear guidelines for testing and deploying autonomous vehicles, standards for data privacy and security. And we need ways to hold people accountable if something goes wrong.
Yeah. And then there are all these new challenges like cybersecurity threats,
Right.
potential bias in algorithms, even the possibility of these technologies being misused.
Exactly. It's a whole new world.
It's like we need a whole new set of laws and regulations just to keep up with this rapidly evolving industry.
We do. And those laws and regulations have to find that balance
Right.
between fostering innovation and protecting public safety and the greater good.
It's a tough balancing act.
It is, but it's essential to get it right.
Okay, so we've got regulations, ethical considerations,
Yeah.
jobs, human well-being. Anything else we should be adding to this list?
Oh, well, one more thing I think we should touch on is the environmental impact of all of this.
Okay, yeah, that's important.
On the one hand, autonomous vehicles could potentially reduce congestion,
Right.
which would lead to fewer emissions, especially if they're powered by renewable energy. But on the other hand, they could actually lead to more sprawl and more energy consumption.
Right.
If they're not designed and used in a thoughtful way.
So it's not just a given that autonomous vehicles are good for the environment.
Exactly. It depends on a lot of factors.
Okay, so regulations, ethics, jobs, human well-being, environmental impact, anything else?
Well, there's one more layer I think we should at least acknowledge, and that's the potential impact on global trade and international relations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, autonomous vehicles could disrupt supply chains, create new economic opportunities, even shift the balance of power between countries.
It's like this technology has the potential to change everything.
It does, and that's why it's so important to be having these conversations now.
Oh, yeah.
While these technologies are still being developed, we need to be thinking ahead, anticipating those challenges and opportunities, and working together to shape a future that benefits everyone.
Okay, well, I need a minute to process all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So in this part of our deep dive, we've explored that tension between progress and tradition, the importance of ethical design, the challenges of job displacement, the need to put human well-being first, the role of regulations, the environmental impacts, and even the potential geopolitical ramifications.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did, but there's still more to explore.
There is.
So we're going to pick up right where we left off in Thirst 3. Part 3 of our deep dive into the world of robotaxis and the changing landscape of transportation. Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking all about robotaxis and the future of transportation, and we've covered so much ground already, from Tesla's ambitions and the Cybertruck success to all these ethical, social, and economic questions that come up.
Yeah, it's been a really fascinating conversation.
It has. And before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier, those comments from the readers of that SpySat News article.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they were so insightful, and they really got me thinking. One comment that really stuck with me was from Ezra, who asked, "How do you see the role of human drivers changing in a world with more and more autonomous vehicles?
Right. It's a question we all have, I think.
Yeah, and it's kind of a scary one for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially with all this talk about job displacement.
Right, exactly. But what do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be a mixed bag. In some areas, human drivers are probably going to be phased out completely.
Mhm.
Like, think about long-haul trucking, for example.
Okay.
We're already seeing those autonomous trucks on the roads, and that's just going to increase.
Yeah.
But I think in other areas, human drivers will find new roles,
Okay.
maybe as safety operators, fleet managers, even customer service reps for ride-sharing companies.
So it's not necessarily like all human drivers are out of a job.
Right. It's more of a shift in their roles and responsibilities.
Right.
And that shift is going to require some adjustments, retraining programs.
Yeah.
We have to help those drivers learn new skills and transition into these new roles.
Right. It's about making sure people aren't left behind.
Exactly.
Another comment that stood out to me was from Grayson, who was really curious about the potential for new business models to pop up.
Oh, yeah. Like
Like, hyper-local ride sharing or peer-to-peer car sharing.
it's exciting to think about all the possibilities.
It is, and it kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah,
When you have these big disruptions, you often see a lot of creativity and innovation.
absolutely. I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible in the transportation sector.
Yeah. And then we can't forget about Isabel's point about the need for government investment in infrastructure.
Right.
We can't just leave it all up to private companies to build the foundation for this autonomous future.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is where those public-private partnerships are so crucial.
Yeah.
Governments need to be involved in creating those regulations, investing in research and development,
Right.
building the infrastructure that will make all of this possible.
Yeah. And of course, Violet's reminder about the human element. Technology should be there to make our lives better, not just more complicated or stressful.
Absolutely. At
Right.
the end of the day, it's about people
Right.
and making sure these advancements are creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling a mix of like excitement and apprehension.
Yeah.
There's so much potential here, but we also need to be really careful.
I agree. It's not about blindly accepting or rejecting technology.
Yep.
It's about shaping it to fit our values and our needs.
And that takes, open conversations,
Mm-hmm.
critical thinking, a willingness to learn and adapt.
Definitely.
So thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the future of transportation. It's been a fascinating conversation.
My pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We
Yeah.
hope it's given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to get involved in this conversation about the future we want to create.
Yeah, the future is not predetermined. We get to shape it.
So let's keep exploring those tough questions and working towards a world where technology empowers us all.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye for now, but we'll see you on our next deep dive.